today's video, we are just going to do a continuation on a part 2 of the genetics paperwork, that kind of thing. What I want to do is I want to talk about junk. I want to talk about that kind of idea, and I want to talk about there was the one thing that I said in there, only one dog in this litter is going to do any good, the rest are going to be junk. Okay, so junk doesn't necessarily mean not hunt. Okay, so and when we're talking about breeding, we're talking about line breeding, and we're talking about genetics. If we are really serious about it and we are doing our thing, we are looking for the top-notch peak performer, right? That is what we're breeding for. So compared to a world champion class dog to a just low-level run-of-your-mill dog, the performance levels there are going to be something that can't be reconciled, right? So they're going to be so different that to this one dog, these dogs might as well have been junk. So it's not that they're actually junk and don't hunt, because if we take two dogs that actually will go out and tree coons and we breed them together, the chances are we are going to get a good percentage of dogs that will go ahead and go tree coons. They might not be on the super high end of things. It might not be the best of the best. Okay, so that's another thing that I wanted to kind of clear up and address there, just to not have any confusion, right? Not to have any confusion. The second thing I wanted to address here is the PR. Okay, so everybody's dog, almost everybody's dog, right? So I would venture to say at this point in time, 90% of dogs that come out of UKC are PR at this time, right? So you will naturally get a PR dog if you just register your dog with the UKC, whether or not their parents are Grand Knighted or World Champed, right? So our dogs will come as PRs. And when I said it quite a few times, and I reiterated that when I was talking about a PR dog, I was specifically talking about a dog that comes from PR dogs and comes from PR dogs and comes from PR dogs, right? So a lot of you probably got a hold of that. Some of you guys might have let that go over your head a little bit. I don't want that to be the case. So when I'm talking about a PR bred dog, what I would say is that if you look at the dog's pedigree, every dog on the pedigree would be PR, including the dog that is there, right? Okay, so another thing about PR dogs. PR dogs can be very well bred and PR dogs can be very well maintained, and you do not have to comp hunt a dog or put titles on a dog to maintain a really good line or maintain a really good genetic pool for your dogs and have high performing dogs, even if they come from nothing but PR dogs, right? So that's another thing that I wanted to clear up. But I think a lot of people understand both sides of the ticket there. I don't want to play the middle ground. I want to just put everything out there, right? So the next thing that I want to talk about here is I kind of mentioned it. I mentioned outcrosses, okay? From the video, I feel like I didn't explain outcrosses enough. So that's where I'm going to sit right here and I'm going to explain the outcrosses a little bit better, right? So we can outcross to a scatterbred dog, right? So we can just take something that has been bred without any consideration and without any thought behind genetics, without any thought of what traits they have or whatever. So we can breed an outcross to that. Another thing that we can do is we can outcross to another line. Okay, so if we have a really well-bred line of dogs and we take another well-bred line of dogs and we breed those two together, what usually will happen is we will throw pretty good dogs, but on an off chance we will throw really, really exceptional dogs, right? So this blood really does well with this blood. So that cross should be continue on to be made, because when we cross these two bloods together, they perform better than either of these two by themselves. So that is the point of having multiple families and multiple lines running together. And one perfect example of that is the picture that I posted of Rackamuli's pedigree. If you look at that pedigree and you study it all the way back, from what I can gather, there is at least 3 solid lines of dogs that are bred into him, right? So we have 3 really well-bred dogs, lines of dogs that are trying to merge and converge together. The one kind of falls off a couple generations back, but then they double up and stack up on the other one, right? So, and one thing about that pedigree that I wanted to point out is, I don't want to quote the generation, but one of those generations there, the same female's name shows up in on 3 sides of the pedigree, okay? So when we can look at that and we can say somebody tried to establish a line of dogs off of this female, We fast forward a couple of lines forward, and then they're building it off of a male dog. And a couple generations behind that, it was off of a male dog, right? So we have them going from a male dog to a male dog line to a female dog line to back to a male dog line. And that's I wanted to kind of mention that and mention the lines and putting 2 lines together or possibly 3 lines together. So when we're looking for outcrosses, we need to look for outcrosses that will cross well with our blood, right? So it's really hard, and your dog's going to be super, super, super inbred if we only have the one family on the family tree. So there should be multiple families of dogs, and it's kind of a suspect thing when I look at papers and I go, okay, they crossed over, but this dog is just a PR dog, no name dog. It goes back to dog that didn't do nothing, goes back to dog that didn't do nothing. So they're just outcrossing to just any old dog, right? Instead of outcrossing to a dog that has a nice family and a nice line behind it. Okay, so that would be kind of line to line breedings. That is probably the best practice, and that is probably the best results that we're going to get. We can have bad crosses, right? So we can have bad crosses, and it could just make complete junk. And I mean like junk for real junk, right? So we can take 2 lines, put them together, and nothing works about them. They're ugly, they won't run, they won't bark, they can't walk, whatever. Some genetics just don't work well together, others do really well. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to address here in this particular video is the recessives. Okay, so I mentioned it about the male dog, the superstar dog with the recessive genes. Okay, so one thing that I felt like I kind of touched on, but I should have touched on a lot more. So if we have a line of line bred dogs, and we get out of this line a supernatural, super freak dog, okay, it could be a dominant trait, right? So we could have a really good dog that has a dominant trait that can pass some genes on, no problem. Or it could be kind of like a recessive deal to where if anything comes back over that is slightly dominant, it's going to delete that supernatural ability, okay? And how he got this recessive gene is from his family, okay? So his family is line bred. So that recessive is carried within his line of dogs. So the best course of action to repeat this dog would be to breed him back to his own line, right? So breed him back to blood that is his own, okay? Instead of a family that's unrelated, we need to breed him back to something that's related to see if because they would have recessives as well, right? So there's a lot of things that we could do, right? So his brothers and sisters would have the same genetics out of the same litter. It's a big no-no to do it, but it could be a benefit to do it at that point in time, because we take 2 of the same genetic dogs that both have recessive genes and throw a full dominant litter, and then we have something that we can go out and produce over other things with, right? So there's always some things, and like I said in other videos, there's always exceptions to the rule. But that recessive thing, man, that will kill a lot of lines, right? That will just take something that's doing really, really well, we outcross it to something, and it's kaput. It's no longer existent besides in this dog and his family behind him, right? So we have to really pay attention to see how a dog does produce over other dogs, see how a dog does produce over other lines, or if this is a dog that needs to be bred back into our own line. And that's one thing that I wanted to cover here, but I'm going to cover this first, is the bad crosses thing. Okay, so with bad crosses brings bad genetics. Okay, so if we have a really well-to-do line bred dog that is line bred properly, and they've mixed it out, and they got aunts and uncles and cousins and just abundance of family that they can breed to keep this line going strong without being too line bred or too inbred, then when we take him and we cross him out, or take her and we cross her out to another family of dogs or to a scatterbred dog, we can introduce bad genetics, right? So we can introduce something, like I said, deletes our genetics that we've worked so hard to get and maintain. And what will happen is, once we introduce this bad genetics into this family, if we take those bad genetics and we breed it back into our family and back into our family and back into our family, then essentially we have dismantled all of our work that we've put in, and going forward we're going to have that bad trait in there, right? So, and it's sometimes one very good example of this is the Clue Anderson podcast with Houndsman XP. What he did, he was talking about it. If we breed, we got to watch them crosses, because when we cross them out, they can bring in bad genetics, and it'll take you generations to get rid of them bad traits that you brought in, right? Whether it be conformation, whether it be temperament, whether it be trashiness, or whatever the case may be. So we have to watch that, right? And so taking dogs and making a little family out of them before we see, right? Oh, we crossed you out. Let's keep you separate out of the regular stuff. We'll breed on you for a little bit and see how you turn out and what traits are actually showing from my line and your line, or that cross or this cross, before we start breeding it and putting it into our program, right? So that's another thing that we have here is it's breeding programs. And I'll just let you guys know right off here, nothing, no skin off my back, man, is a lot of this stuff I did not learn in the coonhound world with the breeding things, right? So that was more to do in the pit bull terrier world, and that was more to do in the American bully world, and doing research and going down that rabbit hole, and being raised around people that were really big American pit bull terrier people, right? So a lot of this information is coming straight down from the dog men and dog women, and that would be a difference if Houndsman XP is asking this or watching this. They always ask the question, what's the difference between a dogsman and a houndsman? Okay, a houndsman runs hounds, and a dogsman has American Pit Bull Terriers. So that would be my answer for that. Okay, so that was the bad crosses, bringing in bad genetics and things like this. Okay, so breeding back to the original. Okay, so this is something that we should probably most definitely do here or there every once in a while, just to reiterate that we are actually pushing the genetics that we want from the dog that we started the line on. So we have one dog and we breed it around a little bit, and we start producing pups out of these pups. A good thing to do is take him and breed him down, right? So breed him straight back down to like his granddaughter, breed him straight back down to an outcross. So we outcross, breed him straight back to those outcross pups to get his blood quantum back in those back into the line, right? So there's a lot of these things that we can do. And stacking pedigrees, that is something that okay, so for example, and I want you guys to go watch the Stark video with Ricky Bryant, okay? In that video where he has that dog that is treeing coons in under 10 minutes, and he's got a stopwatch and it's treeing coons in like 2 minutes flat. He says in that video that that particular dog has Sackett, either Sackett Jr. or Sackett, right, in his pedigree 13 times. Okay, so if you have a dog that has a name in that pedigree 13 times, that dog has been exceptionally line bred for that particular dog. Now that could be 7 generations. I don't know how many generations his pedigree goes back in particular, but I've said it on the channel before. The more times that we see a dog's name in a pedigree, the more line bred that dog is for that particular dog, right? So bringing the original blood back in, right? So we have collecting, we can collect them, we can freeze them, AI breedings, things like that. All this stuff is something that definitely happens. They do it all the time. They do it in the coonhound world. They do it in all the dog worlds. And dog breeding across the board is basically the same. It has the same concept, same kind of ideas. That's why I don't feel bad, imparting this to you, even though I learned the most of this on the other side of the fence with some other dog breeds. Okay, so I wanted to go and take a second here. I wanted to define a comp style dog, right? A competition hunting style dog. All right, so does it exist? Does it not, right? Yes, it exists because we have dogs that comp hunt. Yes, it exists because we have lines of dogs that exclusively comp hunt, right? Or they're hunting to be comp hunted. On the other flip side of that, saying a competition style hunting dog can kind of perk some ears up, kind of ruffle some feathers. So when I say this, what I'm meaning is a dog that is performing way up here, right? So that is it. So they're all coon dogs. They all go out and they all hunt. The difference between a dog that does pretty good in competition hunts and the difference between a dog that don't is that one dog is exceptionally well at what it does, the other dog is not so much. And we also have the other side of this where we have dogs that have their shining moments and they get out there and they get their wins. Or we warm them up, they look like not so hot, and then when they start looking good, we start putting them in hunts. That's all fine and good, but the fact of the matter is, when we put them in comp hunts, they're treating more coons, they're doing more work, they're getting it done faster than the other dogs, so they are exceptionally better than the other dogs. And one thing that I want to just say to prove this and back that idea up is we do not hunt night champions to PR dogs. We do not hunt, you know, grand night champions, the night champions, or whatever. We have a separation and different classes of dogs to be hunted together because they perform at different levels. You can't expect a PR dog to win the world championship against a world champion dog, right? And you can't expect the night champ to go up against whatever, however the case may be. And you know, it depends on the registry that we're talking about and just all this kind of stuff. But just putting that out there in general to just float that to you guys, right? So another thing here that I wanted to talk about is gene isolation. Okay, so when we are breeding, that is all that we are breeding for. We are breeding for gene isolation. We are looking at that dog and going, he shows me this, he shows me that, he does it this way, he does it that way, he acts this way, he barks this way, he does this. We want to isolate that particular gene set in that dog, and we want to be able to pass it on and pass it on. And the whole reason why you would just think, oh, well, we'll just take his mom and dad and breed them together and make that cross again. Take his mom and dad, breed them together, and make that cross again. And we'll just repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. Well, that's not the case, and that's not really how that works. Unless we have blood that really, really clicks together, or a cross that just consistently throws the same kind of idea. So with that, introduces line breeding. We can take that gene isolation, and we can isolate that gene, and we can isolate it over extremely long periods of times, you know, 50, 60 years, 80 years, 100 years, whatever the case may be, right? We don't always have to rely on the two dogs that produce this one dog to give us the off chance to throw that dog again. We can take his particular gene set or her particular gene set, and we can try to recreate that particular genes within that dog. And the best way to do that is to get them straight from the dog itself. So gene isolation is a huge thing on there. I wanted to do this video not for any other reason other than once you start it, man, you kind of got to keep going with it. And I wanted to make sure that I covered a lot of this stuff, at least covered it enough to get you guys the really basic ideas and really put the groundwork in for you guys to, you know, understand that and understand my views and my concepts and the way that it goes. And in general, this is just the world of thinking for breeding in general. We do have other ideas behind breeding, and we do have other ways that people breed, but this is the main way that we reproduce animals is line breeding, right? So that is like the number one way to reproduce animals. And you know, there's all kinds of other things that go into this, you know, like getting too inbred, we can cause low litters. Getting too inbred, we can cause birth defects. Even if we're line breeding, we're breeding back together, we get too tight, we can cause issues, we can cause infertility, we can cause all these kind of issues that can go along with not breeding appropriately. And then we can also cause ourselves to just dismantle, completely destroy a line of dogs, completely just get bad genetics altogether. And if we're not breeding appropriately, ultimately what we're doing is we're just driving them down, right? So we should always be breeding to better the breed. We should always be breeding to do better in all types of ways, right? So we always have all these little things that we always have to worry about, you know. So kink tails is another one that we can get, you know, under bites, undershot jaws, just all kinds of stuff, you guys. Anything that you guys can think of, that's what can happen if we inbreed too tightly, or if we're just not careful in what we're doing, because you can make bad crosses and throw some really messed up stuff. So let's just go ahead and wrap that video up. I'm going to get you guys a huge shout out video coming up. It is like, oh my goodness, I have the past 3 videos, I've gotten almost 100 or more comments. It's like I'm going to have to take a really long time to sit down and get you guys your comments, but they're coming for you guys. So you all know what it is. Keep them treated.